At Starbound, we tell stories the human way, not with artificial voices or AI slop. In the end, what's HFY without humanity? Subscribe to keep it this way. My name's General G. Let's begin. The main issue with confronting a living god of war was the profound, soul-crushing boredom. Jovan Croft stood in a line of alien cadets, all of them motionless figures, and counted the hangar's ceiling grates to keep from screaming. He'd tallied them twice. 112. The quiet in the Meridian Aegis Academy's main testing hangar was a weaponized, oppressive thing, a product of sound-dampening fields that enforced Solakine discipline. This engineered quiet amplified every nervous tick, every hitched breath, every microscopic tremor into a loud confession of weakness. And the god of war, which now inspected a 9-foot reptilian with a bloodhound's focus, heard every one. Jovan shifted his gaze to a massive viewport in the hangar wall. Outside, the moon of Acheron's Veil glowed, a desolate and beautiful wasteland under the colossal, swirling eye of the gas giant Jormungand. The planet's thin atmosphere boiled against the station's shields. The scrubbed, metallic-tasting air in his lungs felt like a fragile gift, a thin membrane of survival between him and the hard vacuum a few meters away, a good reminder to keep calm. They called the beast Maw, the last of its kind, a biological superweapon from an empire turned to dust before humanity discovered sharp sticks. A mountain of scarred hide, the color of cooled magma, rippled with muscle that could tear through a starship's hull. Its ground car-sized head held eyes that burned with a low golden fire, an intelligence ancient and more terrifying than any mere animal's. This ritual, the Crucible, served as the final test for the top 1%. The instructions were simple: stand still while Maw delivered its judgment. No one ever passed. The beast moved down the line and stopped before a Solacean cadet, a sculpted pillar of silver-skinned perfection. Maw's plasma cannon-wide nostrils flared. It inhaled and tasted the cadet's scent on the sterile air. A jaw muscle twitched on the Solacean, a giveaway of his strain. That single twitch sealed his fate. Maw let out a deep, chest-rattling snort of profound disappointment that vibrated through the deck plates, the sound of a master craftsman inspecting shoddy work. The Solacean sagged, his life's ambition undone by a single dismissive puff of air. Maw moved on, a silent, graceful predator stalking through a gallery of statues. One by one, it rejected them. A telepath empath whose twin minds pulsed with suppressed aggression. A graven from a high-gravity world, its dense body thrumming with an anxious, accelerated metabolism. Each paragon of martial discipline and physical prowess fell short. Each betrayed a flicker of fear, a surge of pride, a desperate need to dominate. Maw sought something other than a challenger. Finally, it stopped before Jovan, the anomaly, the human, the soft-shelled, emotionally erratic, strategically unpredictable ape descendant from a backwater world. The first of his species to qualify for the Crucible, a fact that's constantly irritated the Academy's Solacean elite. Maw lowered its colossal head, its golden eyes locked on his. Jovan stood, his breath stayed even, his heart a steady rhythmic drum. He met the beast's stare without challenge, his posture relaxed. He let its presence wash over him, a tidal wave of ancient power and predatory intent. A primal part of his brain screamed for him to run, to climb, to flee this walking extinction event. He calmly told that part of his brain to be quiet, and fell back on old training, from a life before starships and alien academies. Just a wildfire, he thought. The memory of scorching heat and roaring flames, a sudden familiar comfort. A big one, the kind that eats mountains for breakfast. You yield to it, you cede control. You find the center, the calm point where the wind dies down, and hold it. Panic is the fuel, starve it of oxygen. Maw circled him. Its massive snout sniffed his combat fatigues, the worn synth leather of his boots, the faint scent of scrubbed air and human sweat. It paused, and its warm, moist breath washed over Jovan's face. He remained still. He watched the light play in its ancient golden eyes, and for a fleeting moment he saw a deep and terrible loneliness instead of a monster. The hangar held its collective breath. The atmosphere grew thin, ready to snap. Then Maud did something new. It exhaled. A great, shuddering sigh rippled the air. A sound of weary finality, of a search finally ended. A ground-shaking thud vibrated up Jovan's spine as the living god of war collapsed to the floor. It curled its immense body at Jovan's feet, its armored tail wrapped protectively around his boots, while it rested its head on its paws. Well, that's one way to pass a test, Jovan thought. I doubt it fetches. It'd probably bring back a shuttle. A wave of disbelief crashed through the hangar's sterile quiet. Cadets shifted, their perfect discipline broken. Instructors stared at their data pads, now filled with biomedical readings that had shifted from agitated predator to content housecat. From the observation deck high above, Cadet Captain Lawrence, the Academy's finest, a Solician born for command, watched his perfectly ordered universe unravel. His composure, forged in 1,000 simulations and a lifetime of brutal discipline, cracked. His voice, broadcast over the open comm channel for every cadet and instructor to hear, became a whisper of horrified accusation. I sensed the Alpha. The hangar buzzed like a disturbed hive. Whispers turned to urgent, hushed arguments. The sheer, unprecedented weirdness of the situation drowned out Lawrence's pronouncement, meant as an insult. A living weapon designed to shatter planets now napped at the feet of a human who looked more surprised than anyone. Instructors rushed onto the floor, their faces a mixture of confusion and clinical curiosity. Their datapads beeped and whirred, and confirmed the readings. Maw's neuroactivity had dropped to a resting state. Its heart rate slowed, steady and calm. The beast, for all intents and purposes, relaxed. Commandant Bohr descended from the observation deck with the slow, deliberate certainty of a glacier. His ancient Solician face, which seemed carved from granite, was unreadable. He was older than the Academy itself, a veteran of wars the current generation only read about in history texts. He dismissed the gawking cadets with a single curt wave. They scattered, their perfect arrangements dissolving into clumps of confused discussion. Jovan still stood frozen. He stared down at the massive, dark creature coiled around his boots. He felt the low thrum of its breathing through his shoe soles. He cautiously shifted his weight. A golden eye cracked open, regarded him for a second, and then closed with a soft chuff of air. Okay, friends now, that was new. Lawrence marched towards him, his silver uniform immaculate, his posture a beacon of furious, disciplined outrage. He stopped 2 paces from Jovan, his angular face tight with the confusion that rapidly soured into anger.
100 rotations this test has run.
Lawrence seethed, his voice a low, sharp weapon. His culture disdained linguistic sloppiness. He did not use contractions.
No off-worlder, let alone a human, has ever passed the crucible. What trick did you use? Pheromones? A low-frequency sonic device? Some base Terran witchcraft?
Jovan looked from the sleeping beast to the fuming Solician. He gave a small, deadpan shrug that seemed to physically wound Lawrence. I did nothing, he said, his voice calm. Maybe it was just tired. It's a big room, lots of walking. Lawrence's nostrils flared.
Do not mock me, human. You have desecrated a sacred tradition. That weapon is the legacy of the Silurian Dominion, a living codex of warfare. It does not get tired.
Before the cadet captain could escalate from verbal to physical assault, a heavy 3-fingered hand landed on his shoulder. Commandant Bohr stood behind him, his presence sucking all the heat from the confrontation.
You misunderstand the weapon's nature, Cadet Captain.
Bohr's voice rumbled, deep and resonant, like stones grinding at a river bottom. He spoke quietly, but his words carried an authority that commanded absolute attention. Lawrence stiffened and turned to face his superior. Commandant, The human has clearly cheated. He has somehow subverted the test's parameters.
On the contrary,
Bohr said, his gaze fixed on Jovan and the beast.
He is the first to understand them.
He gently but firmly steered Lawrence aside.
You and all who came before you approached the beast as a challenge for conquest. You sought mastery. You are a Solician, bred for dominance and order. It is your nature.
His eyes shifted to Jovan.
But Moore seeks a fulcrum, not a pack leader. A point of absolute stability around which the chaos of battle can turn. The difference is everything.
Bohr gestured for Jovan to follow and turned his back on the fuming, utterly baffled Lawrence.
Come, Cadet Lieutenant Croft. Your debriefing has been accelerated.
Jovan took a hesitant step and carefully extricated his boot from under Maw's tail. The beast stirred and lifted its head with a low rumble. Its golden eyes locked on his, a clear question in them. Jovan gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. The beast seemed to understand and rested its head on the deck with another contented sigh. He turned and followed the Commandant, leaving a wake of stunned silence and a single, very confused Solician captain. Commandant Bohr's office was the antithesis of Solician military austerity. It was a place for quiet contemplation. One wall, a massive viewport, held the breathtaking, violent beauty of the gas giant Jormungand. Swirls of orange, crimson, and deep indigo churned in the continent-sized storms, a silent, majestic ballet of cosmic chaos. The office itself was Spartan, a simple desk, 2 chairs, and a single ancient sword mounted on the wall opposite the window. Bohr gestured for Jovan to sit. The Commandant remained standing, his hulking form silhouetted against Jormungand's swirling backdrop.
The Admiralty believes the Crucible is a test of courage.
Bohr began, his voice a low rumble.
They are, to put it mildly, fools. They see Ma as a relic, a ceremonial tool to weed out the timid.
He turned from the window, his ancient eyes pinning Jovan in place.
The Crucible is a search, not a test.
He walked to his desk and tapped a control. A holographic star chart bloomed in the air between them. It showed the familiar spiraling arms of their galactic section, dotted with the blue icons of galactic coalition systems.
For 40 years, since Maw came here, we have brought our greatest warriors to face it. Decorated fleet admirals, legendary ground commanders, even members of the Solician High Command. He gestured dismissively at the memory. All of them failed. They all approached the beast with the arrogance of conquerors. They all tried to be its master, and Maw rejected them all.
He zoomed in on a section of the chart near the Coalition's border. A cluster of angry red icons appeared, shimmering like blood in the holographic light.
I realize we sought the wrong thing, Bohr continued. The galaxy is full of masters. We need a fulcrum, a quiet center. So I put my faith in the unwritten potential of the next generation instead of the decorated past. I opened the Crucible to the best of the best from every species, hoping one of you would see what our admirals could not.
See what, sir? Jovan asked, his voice quiet.
A partner,
Bohr stated simply. Not a pet, not a tool, a partner. He pointed a thick, stony finger at the red icons. Coalition intelligence has tracked Kroth hegemony fleet movements for the better part of a year. These icons represent their staging grounds. The Admiralty believes this is posturing, a bluff to gain concession in the next treaty talks.
You disagree, sir, Jovan said.
It was a statement. Bohr's expression darkened.
I have studied Kroth history. They do not bluff. Their entire military doctrine is built around a single brutal concept. The scything talon, a strategy of overwhelming, decapitating force, aimed directly at the enemy's command structure. They fight the minds that lead armies, not the armies themselves.
He tapped another control, and the Academy schematic appeared, overlaid with dozens of blinking biosignatures.
This year's Crucible is special, Cadet. For the first time in a decade, the heirs to every major military house in the Coalition are present. The brightest strategic minds, the most promising field commanders, the future admirals and generals of the entire galactic coalition are all right here, on this moon.
The weight of that gathering settled in the room. The Academy was more than a school. At this moment, it was the single most valuable strategic target in the galaxy. An attack now decapitates the entire next generation of Coalition leadership in a single surgical stroke, Bor said, his voice grim. He met Jovan's eyes, the pressure of a coming war settling between them. I accelerated this test because I fear our time is short. The Koroth will attack when we are unprepared. Their doctrine is designed to shatter predictable, rigid command structures like ours. Our discipline, our greatest strength, will be our undoing, unless we have a counter. Something they cannot predict, something their battle simulations cannot model. He gestured from the holo-display to Jovan. You, Cadet Lieutenant Croft, are something they cannot predict. He deactivated the chart, the sudden darkness making the room feel smaller, more intimate. Your performance in the Crucible was a designation, not a pass. Your assignment is unprecedented, effective immediately. Bor's voice left no room for argument. Learn the weapon. The containment pen was less a cage and more a bunker. The walls were meters thick with reinforced alloy, designed to withstand a dreadnought's main gun. An energy barrier hummed across the entrance, crackling with contained power. Inside, Ma was agitated again. The calm from the hangar was gone, replaced by a restless, caged energy. It paced the perimeter, a silent, relentless circuit. Its claws, each the size of a grown man's forearm, left faint, glowing scratches on the hardened floor. Jovan stood outside the barrier, flanked by two nervous technicians. One held out a control unit. Standard procedure, sir, is to use the sonic pacifier to induce a compliant state before entering. Jovan looked at the device, then at the pacing beast. Using a sonic weapon on the creature that had, for whatever reason, chosen him felt like a profound betrayal. No, he said simply. Turn off the barrier. The technicians exchanged a panicked look. Sir, regulations explicitly state... The Commandant's orders were to learn the weapon. I can't do that from out here, Jovan said, his tone leaving no room for debate. And my first lesson is that it dislikes being treated like an animal. Now, turn it off! Reluctantly, the senior technician keyed a sequence into his datapad. With a descending whine, the crackling energy field vanished. The air in the massive chamber suddenly felt heavy, charged with the beast's presence. The technicians backed away slowly, their hands hovering over their sidearms. Jovan walked into the pen. He avoided approaching Ma directly. He found a heavy-duty supply crate near the wall, dragged it a few meters inside, and sat. Then he waited. Ma stopped pacing. It turned its massive head, its golden eyes fixed on the small, stationary human who had invaded its space. It let out a low, inquisitive rumble, a sound that vibrated in Jovan's chest. It took a step towards him, then another. The sheer scale of it up close was overwhelming. Jovan felt a familiar knot of fear tighten in his stomach, the primal instinct to flee screaming at him. He pushed it down and focused on his breathing. Just a wildfire. Find the center. Hold it. He sat and observed. He watched the beast's movements, the subtle twitch of its layered armor plates, the way its head canted as it processed the station's sounds. He realized its pacing was deliberate, not random. The patterns were a series of sharp 90-degree turns followed by a wide, sweeping arc. A sudden halt, a moment of stillness, then a simulated lunge. It was running drills, shield wall advances, phalanx probes, flanking maneuvers. These were movements from a war that ended before his species discovered fire. A deep, lonely intelligence was at work here, a warrior trapped in an endless solitary war game. After nearly an hour of silent observation, Jovan reached into a pocket of his fatigues and pulled out a ration packet, a beige, protein-rich gel. He leaned forward and slid it across the floor. It skittered to a stop a few feet from the beast's massive claws. Ma stopped its phantom maneuvers. It lowered its head and sniffed the small silver packet with a deep, inquisitive rumble. The sound was different this time, a lower frequency, less questioning and more analytical. After a moment, it nudged the pack with its snout, gently sliding it back towards Jovan. The message was clear. It wanted a partner, not a master who bribed it with food. The simple gesture broke the room's strained atmosphere. Jovan nodded slowly. All right, he he said softly, the first words he'd spoken in the pen. "No treats. Got it." Ma seemed to understand. The coiled tension in its powerful limbs eased. It took a few steps closer, then settled onto the floor with a ground-shaking thud, its golden eyes fixed on the strange, calm human who asked for nothing and offered only his quiet, steady presence. The search, it seemed, was truly over for them both. A piercing, rising alarm blared from every speaker, a scream of electronic terror that cut through the station's deep hum like a knife. This was a real alert. Red emergency lights bathed the corridor outside the pen in a hellish glow. Through the massive armored viewport in the containment sector, they could see them. Jagged black iron teeth screamed through Archeron's veil's thin atmosphere. They were drop pods, not elegant landing craft. They impacted, they did not land. The world dissolved into a slideshow of silent, blinding flashes and deep, bone-jarring vibrations that traveled through the Academy's very foundations. The Karoth had arrived. Textbook, scything talon. Swift, overwhelming, and aimed directly at the heart. One of the pods, horrifically off course or horrifyingly on target, slammed directly into the roof of the containment sector 100 meters away. The ceiling shrieked as it tore open. Depressurization alarms wailed, a shrill counterpoint to the deep groan of stressed metal. The air rushed out with a deafening roar, carrying dust and debris into the emptiness. The main lights died instantly, plunging the vast chamber into a blood-red darkness illuminated by emergency strobes and the gaping star-dusted wound in the roof. The energy barrier to Ma's pen, its power source severed, sputtered, flickered, and vanished with a final pathetic whine. Figures descended through the ragged hole in the ceiling. Karoth shock troopers, encased in heavy, brutalist armor, rode grav chutes down through the swirling dust. They landed on the deck with muffled, heavy thuds, their movements economical and brutally effective. Their ugly, concussive rifles were already up, sweeping the darkness for targets. Jovan was trapped. His only weapon was the standard-issue plasma pistol at his hip. A pathetic pea shooter against armored shock troops. He flattened himself behind the supply crate, drew the weapon, his mind racing. The Karoth advanced into their pen, their helmeted heads turning in methodical arcs. They were hunting. As the first trooper leveled his rifle, a shadow detached itself from the deeper darkness of the pen. A patch of night gained mass and momentum. Maw exploded from the shadows. Its violence was pure and kinetic, the fury of a weapon unleashed. In the thin air, its roar was a physical force, a muffled chest-thumping concussion that could stop a man's heart. It moved with terrifying, silent grace, a blur of dark muscle and razor-sharp claws. It slammed into the Korath squad, but its attack was a flurry of disconnected genius. It executed a flawless Silurian shield-breaking charge, obliterating the first trooper. Then it pivoted into a perfect defensive stance, facing an empty wall, a textbook maneuver completely irrelevant to the current fight. It was a supercomputer running every program at once, its brilliance lost without a guiding operating system. Jovan, scrambling for better cover, saw it. A Karoth trooper, shrewder than the others, had weathered the initial chaotic assault and was setting up a heavy blaster on a tripod. The weapon was powerful enough to punch through a bunker wall or an ancient war beast's hide. A split second before Jovan consciously registered the threat, he saw Ma's head twitch in that direction, its body coiling, its senses picking up the charging weapon's energy signature. It was pure combat instinct. Jovan's mind, trained to read the subtle shifts in a raging inferno, read the beast's intent. Reacting to his partner's instinct instead of the enemy, he shouted, his voice cutting through the dim. "Ma! Left flank! Heavy weapon!" The beast responded instantly. Jovan's words focused its raw, primal power. Its own instinct, now validated and directed by an external intelligence, became a guided missile. It abandoned its pointless defensive stance and lunged to the left, a black comet of death. It crashed into the heavy blaster team before they could fire, neutralizing the threat in a spray of shattered armor and sparkling metal. In that moment, their synergy clicked. He was the spotter, it was the cannon. He was the mind, it was the sword. Together, they were something new, and they had a station to save. They fought their way out of the shattered containment sector and into the Academy's main concourse. It was a slaughterhouse. Solasian cadets, drilled to perfection in precise, beautiful arrangements, were systematically dismantled. The Karath fought with a brutal, chaotic effectiveness that made a mockery of the Solasians' rigid doctrines. Jovan saw Lawrence across the concourse. The cadet captain was a beacon of discipline in the chaos. His silver uniform stained with grime, his voice crisp and clear over the comms as he issued orders. Squad Beta, defensive pattern Delta 9. Focus fire on the western archway. Squad Gamma, execute flanking maneuver Epsilon 3. On my mark, Lawrence commanded. It was a perfect maneuver from the Solasian Tactical Manual, designed to encircle and crush a disorganized enemy. The Karath were anything but disorganized. They had studied those same manuals. They counted on that predictability. Lawrence watched in horror as his flanking squad, moving with flawless coordination, ran directly into a pre-placed concealed minefield. The thin air swallowed the explosions, replacing them with silent, brutal flashes of light. Bodies were thrown, their armor breached, their perfect group disintegrated into a tableau of death. For a single fatal second, Lawrence froze. His entire worldview, his unshakable faith in the perfection of doctrine, had just been vaporized. The textbook was wrong. There was no procedure for this. He had no orders to give. In that moment of utter failure, as a Karath hover tank blew a new entrance in the Academy's outer wall, Jovan slid into the cover of a fallen pillar beside him. Ma moved with him, a living shield of dark hide. Great, Jovan thought, his internal voice a dry counterpoint to the chaos. Pinned down by a tank the size of my hometown city hall. This is a structure fire, not a firefight. You take out the supports, not fight the building. His eyes scanned the floor, searching for load-bearing walls, electrical conduits, the station's plumbing. The hover tank was a mobile bunker. It glided into the concourse on humming grav repulsors, its brutalist iron-gray hull deflecting plasma bolts like spitballs. Its main cannon fired a wave of pure concussive force instead of a projectile. It made a deep, gut-punching whump that rattled your teeth. The blast wave, a visible ripple in the air, sent Solasians in braced, shielded stances flying through the low gravity. "Coordinated fire on the primary turret joint!" Lawrence roared, recovering his voice, falling back on doctrine. "Volley fire on my command!" His remaining squad members responded instantly. A dozen plasma rifles fired as one, their green bolts converging on the point Lawrence had indicated. The bolts splashed against the tank's armor, filling the air with the scent of superheated tungsten and flash-cooked metal, a beautiful, perfectly executed, and utterly useless display. The tank's turret swiveled, its main cannon charging for another shot. They were going to die. They were going to die following procedure. "This is useless!" Jovan yelled over the concussive whump of the tank's cannon. Ma snarled, a low, guttural sound of frustration, its claws scraping uselessly against the deck plates. "We must maintain firing discipline," Lawrence shot back, denial tightening the lines of his face. "The doctrine states sustained, focused fire will overwhelm any armor." "The doctrine is about to get us turned into paste," Jovan countered, his eyes locked on the floor beneath the tank. He had found the building's support beam. Heavy-duty power conduits, their glowing plasma cores visible through reinforced transparasteel panels, ran directly under the main concourse. They were the power lines for the entire sector. Ma suddenly roared, a direct challenge to the tank. A suicidal, audacious move. The tank's turret locked onto the beast, ignoring the cadets. "Ma, no!" Jovan yelled, but it was too late. The cannon fired. The concussive blast hit the war beast square in the chest. The creature, which weighed as much as the tank itself, lifted off its feet and hurled backward, crashing through a decorative wall with a shower of plasteel and synthetics. But it gave Jovan the opening he needed. "We can't break it," Jovan said into the comms, his voice suddenly calm and clear amidst the chaos. "So, we'll get rid of the floor." He pointed. "Lawrence, See those conduits? Massive power lines. If we overload them, the heat will superheat the deck plates from below. It will compromise their structural integrity." Lawrence stared at him as if he had just started speaking gibberish. Destroying the station's infrastructure to fight an enemy? It was a flagrant violation of every regulation in the book. It was insane. It was also, he realized with a sickening lurch, their only chance. A low groan came from the rubble where Ma had landed. The beast stirred. It had drawn the tank's fire. It had bought them time. Lawrence's pride, his discipline, his entire lifetime of training, warred with the stark reality of his impending death. The choice was between a perfect, honorable death by the book or a chaotic, unpredictable chance at survival. For the first time in his life, he chose chaos. "Do it!" he barked into his comms, the words feeling alien in his mouth. He turned to his remaining squad. "You heard him. Target the conduit junctions. Single shots. On my mark." His Solician snipers, though visibly confused by the unorthodox command, obeyed instantly. Their faith was in their commander, even if his orders were insane. They lined up their shots, their rifle sights glowing green on the junctions Jovan had indicated. From the rubble, Ma rose. Its dark hide was cracked, and a trickle of blue blood that shifted from violet to copper oozed from a gash on its shoulder. But it was alive. It let out another defiant, concussive roar, a pure act of will, and charged the tank again. A deliberate tactical distraction. The beast was learning too. The tank's turret swiveled, its secondary machine gun spitting a hail of kinetic slugs that sparked and ricocheted off Ma's bio-armor. The beast was thrown back but stayed on its feet, a living wall of defiance. "Now!" Lawrence commanded. The Solician snipers fired. Their plasma bolts, guided by a lifetime of training, struck the conduit junctions at their exact center point. The floor beneath the massive hover tank began to glow a dull red. The deck plates buckled with a groan of tortured metal. The Karath tank fired its main cannon one last time, and the recoil combined with its immense weight on the compromised floor was the final straw. With a final echoing crash that was far louder than any explosion, the superheated floor gave way. The multi-ton war machine plunged through the deck, disappearing into the service levels below. A new quiet descended, broken by the crackle of fires and the distant sound of fighting. Lawrence stared at the gaping, molten-edged hole in the floor. He started to bark a standard regrouping order, then stopped. He looked at the chaos, then at the calm human. He swallowed his pride. "Croft," he said, the word a surrender and a question. "Your assessment?" Jovan was already looking at Ma. The beast had padded to its side, nudging his shoulder with its massive head. Then it went still. Its head angled low, its ears swiveling to focus on a seemingly empty corridor to their right. Jovan's mind flashed back to the containment bay, to Ma tracking the heavy gunner before he had even seen him. It's gone still, head angled low, the same posture. He was reading the patterns, interpreting the living codex. "We're about to have company," Jovan said calmly. He pointed. "Corridor 9. Set up a kill zone." Lawrence moved instantly. "You heard him," he relayed to his squad, his voice finding its strength again. "Establish interlocking fields of fire. Corridor 9. Move!" The Solicians, moving with their innate coordination, set up a perfect ambush. Moments later, a Karath flanking party, designed to mop up any survivors from the tank attack, sprinted around the corner and ran straight into a wall of focused plasma fire. The fight was over in seconds. Jovan was no longer just a cadet. He was an interpreter. Lawrence was no longer just a captain following a book. He was the razor's edge, giving form to Jovan's chaotic insights. And Ma was the bond between them, the ancient instinct that guided modern strategy. With a momentary lull in the fighting, Jovan patched his datapad into a damaged network terminal. The Karath were good but messy. He found what he sought, the core of their decapitation strike. They had established a wide-spectrum communications jammer in the Academy's central command spire. It cut them off from the outside and prevented any warning from reaching the Coalition fleet. The main Korath invasion fleet was out there, waiting for the signal that the Academy's leadership had been wiped out. The probe was just the first wave. Their objective was suddenly crystal clear. They had to get to that spire, disable the jammer, and send a warning before the hammer fell on the entire sector. The direct route to the command spire was a fortified death trap. The Korath had funneled the Academy's defenders into predictable choke points and were grinding them down with heavy weapons and overwhelming numbers. Standard Solician doctrine dictated a frontal assault. It would be a bloodbath. Jovan looked past the concourse's shattered dome at the star-dusted sky and the colossal, swirling face of Jormungand. The Korath fight like a wildfire in a cannon, he thought. All headlong, predictable momentum. All you do is get ahead of them and start a backburn. They expect the direct route, he said to Lawrence. They've planned for it. So we won't take it. He pointed up. We go outside. Lawrence followed his gaze. The idea was tactically insane, unheard of. The Solician cadets around them looked at Jovan with expressions of pure disbelief. Right, Jovan thought internally. Spacewalk. Of course the plan involves climbing a skyscraper in a glorified scuba suit while people shoot at us. Just another mid-shift at the Academy. He just offered a small, grim smile. Good, he said. They won't expect it. The moonwalk was breathtaking and terrifying. The team, now a mixed unit of Jovan, Lawrence, a handful of his best snipers, and Maw, used mag boots to climb the sheer outer face of the command spire. The only sounds were the hiss and crackle of their suit comms and the rhythmic clank-clank of their boots on the hull. A slight unsettling floatiness accompanied every step, a constant reminder of the lethal emptiness just beyond their visors. Above them, the gas giant Jormungand loomed, a silent, swirling god of a planet that filled half the sky. Below, the battle for the Academy raged in an eerie, silent ballet of muted plasma flashes, silent concussive blasts, and tiny figures moving through shattered corridors. It was like watching a war with the sound turned off. Maw moved with a predatory grace. Here, in the lack of air and low gravity, it was utterly at home. It flowed up the spire's surface instead of climbing, its claws finding purchase in the alloy plating as easily as a cat climbs a tree. It was a creature born for the hostile, silent space between worlds. "Status report," Lawrence's voice said in their helmets, crisp and professional. He had adapted to the chaos with a speed that impressed Jovan. "All clear," a sniper reported. "View is impressive." "Save the sightseeing for the victory parade," Jovan replied, his own voice calm. "Stay focused. They'll have patrols." He was right. As they neared the command level, exterior platforms patrolled by Korath troopers in vacuum-sealed armor came into view. A searchlight swept across the spire's skin and caught the glint of a sniper's scope. The galaxy exploded into a firefight on the side of a skyscraper in the dead of space. The low gravity turned the battle into a three-dimensional nightmare. Korath troopers used their grav chutes to leap from platform to platform, firing silent concussive rounds that threatened to knock the cadets loose from their mag-boot moorings. Maw became a whirlwind of death. It used the low gravity, launching itself from the spire's wall like a missile. It crashed onto a platform, a silent, furious explosion of claws and teeth, clearing it of Korath in seconds before leaping across a chasm of empty space to the next. Jovan and Lawrence fought back-to-back on a narrow maintenance gantry. Lawrence laid down covering fire, each plasma bolt a deliberate spaced shot that struck the weak points in the Korath armor with unerring accuracy. Jovan aimed for the environment instead of the enemy. He shot out the controls for a cargo crane, sending a multi-ton container swinging into a group of troopers. He targeted the supports for a platform, sending it and its occupants tumbling silently into the dark. It was a perfect fusion, human improvisation and Socialian skill, chaos and order working in a deadly, beautiful duet. They blasted their way through an access hatch and into the spire's command center. The shriek of escaping air filled the room for a brief, violent moment. Lawrence slapped a quick seal charge over the mangled hatchway. A blue field flickered into place, and the shriek died. The room pressurized again. It was the nerve center of the Korath operation. In the center, a complex, ugly piece of Karath technology pulsed with a malevolent energy, the source of the communications jammer. Guarding it was the Karath probe commander, a behemoth of a warrior in ornate, scarred armor, flanked by his honor guard of elite troopers. The Karath commander was twice the size of a normal trooper and wielded a massive concussive hammer that crackled with energy. He saw the mentor and let out a guttural roar, a challenge that vibrated through the deck. A direct assault would be suicide. The honor guard was too disciplined, the commander too powerful. The Solsalian snipers took up positions, but the Karath were too well entrenched. "They are dug in," Lawrence yelled, taking cover behind a server bank. "We cannot break their line." "Then we break the room," Jovan replied. He scrambled to a nearby command terminal, his fingers tapping across the holographic interface. He was a clumsy slicer, but Karath systems, like their tactics, were brutalist and direct. He found what he was looking for. He slammed his palm on a control. "Hold your breath," he shouted. Jovan was attacking their ability to process the battle, not their bodies. He was using the scything talon against them. It was like fighting a blaze in a chemical plant. You choke it of oxygen, you dump foam on it, you change the entire environment. With a loud hiss, the station's emergency fire suppression system kicked in. Thick, white, blinding foam poured from nozzles in the ceiling, rapidly filling the room. It was more than a visual obstruction. It muffled sound and clung to armor, making movement difficult. The Karath, their perfect defense line, now useless, roared in frustration. But Jovan was still going. He hacked another system. Dormant maintenance drones, small spider-like robots for cleaning and repairs, suddenly activated. Dozens of them swarmed from their charging alcoves and scuttled across the floor and walls, their metallic legs clattering. They were distractions, getting underfoot, climbing onto the Karath troopers, obscuring their vision. The command center devolved into a chaotic, foam-filled blizzard of confusion and clattering drones. The Karath were blind, deafened, and disoriented. Their rigid discipline had become a liability. Through the chaos, Lawrence moved like a wraith. He had abandoned his rifle for his ceremonial Solasian blade, a length of energized metal that glowed faintly. He now trusted Jovan's chaotic plans implicitly. He needed to trust the fulcrum, not see the whole battlefield. He flowed through the foam, a silver ghost in the whiteout. He used the Karath's confusion, their panicked, blind firing to his advantage. A trooper would turn to fend off a swarm of maintenance drones, and Lawrence's blade would flash, silent and deadly. He was a predator, perfectly adapted to this new chaotic environment. No longer a soldier following orders, he was the scalpel to Jovan's chaotic hammer, surgically eliminating the honor guard one by one while they were disoriented. The Karath commander bellowed in rage, swatting drones and troopers aside as he tried to find his enemies in the foam. He found one. Maw met him in the center of the room in a primal clash of raw power. The beast and the behemoth collided, a silent explosion of force. The commander was strong. He swung his massive concussive hammer, and the weapon connected with Maw's side. The silent blast sent the war beast staggering back, a web of cracks appearing on its dark hide. It bled, its blue blood steaming in the cold foam. The Karath commander moved in for the killing blow and raised his hammer high. His aggression, his focus on the kill, created a tiny split-second opening as he shifted his weight. Jovan saw it. "Now, Maw!" Jovan's voice cut through the comms, clear and certain. "The leg joint! The unarmored servo!" It was a lifeline, an act of faith, more than an order. Maw, trusting Jovan's eyes over its own pain, pivoted on its wounded leg. Instead of retreating or meeting the hammer head-on, it lunged low and ignored the overhead threat. Its claws, sharp enough to shear starship hulls, tore through the weaker, unarmored joint at the back of the commander's knee. Servos screeched, metal tore, and the Karath behemoth collapsed with a titanic crash, his killing blow swinging wide and smashing uselessly into the deck. Their bond was now a two-way street. They fought together. They saved each other. As the Karath commander lay defeated, his honor guard eliminated by Lawrence's deadly dance, The Solasian snipers had a clear shot. A coordinated volley of plasma fire struck the humming jammer console. It erupted in a shower of sparks, and its oppressive hum died with a mournful whine. The jamming frequency that blanketed the Academy was gone. Jovan scrambled to a functioning communications panel and bypassed the Kareth encryption. He opened a Priority 1 channel to Coalition High Command, his voice steady despite the adrenaline in his veins. "This is Cadet Lieutenant Jovan Croft, Acheron's Vale ICA. Kareth probe defeated. Repeat, probe defeated. Main invasion fleet is en route. The scything Talon is real. Repeat, the Talon is real." He sent the message. A few seconds later, a coded acknowledgement squawked back. They had been heard. On orbit. The surviving Kareth dropships, their mission a failure, and their element of surprise lost, began a rapid strategic withdrawal. The battle for the Academy was won. The smoke and foam slowly cleared, revealing a scene of utter devastation. Commandant Bohr, his own armor scarred from the fighting, found them in the ruins of the command spire. Jovan was leaning against a console, catching his breath. Ma sat loyally at his side, its wounds already beginning to seal with a faint bioluminescent glow. A low, steady thrum of contentment emanated from its deep chest. Lawrence, his uniform torn and his face streaked with grime, stood tall. He looked at Jovan, then at the beast, his expression one of profound transformation. He walked over to Jovan, came to a perfect attention, and executed a formal, flawless Solasian salute of respect, the gesture of a subordinate to a commanding officer. Bohr's datapad chimed. He glanced at it, then at the scene before him. "The fleet received your message," he rumbled. "A Kareth invasion fleet, 10 times the size of this probe, just broke from their staging ground. They are burning for Coalition space. Your warning, it may have given us the time we need to mount a defense." He looked at the human, the Solasian, and the ancient warbeast, a unit that defied every military doctrine he had ever known. "The old ways have failed," Bohr stated, a note of finality in his voice. "Our predictability almost cost us everything. We need a new weapon, a new strategy." He looked directly at Jovan. "We need a fulcrum." He tapped a command into his datapad. Jovan's own device chimed. He looked down and saw an official notice from the Coalition Admiralty, a field promotion. "Acting Captain Croft," Bohr said, the new title hanging in the air. "Your first order is to form the 1st Chimera Squadron, a mixed species, unconventional warfare unit. Your mission will be to go where doctrine cannot, to do what the predictable cannot." He glanced at Lawrence, who still stood at attention. "Captain Cadet Lawrence will be your executive officer." Lawrence did not protest. He did not even blink. He simply gave a sharp affirmative nod. Jovan looked from the stoic commandant to his new unlikely XO, and then to the loyal warbeast at his side. He looked through the shattered viewport at the endless star-studded dark where an enemy now came for them all. It was a daunting, terrifying future, but for the first time, the galaxy had an unpredictable, audacious, and very human advantage.